What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Crew 2. So I'm sure everybody is aware that many of the vehicles on the game have been getting their handling updates, which honestly is going to be pretty awesome. Not only because it's going to mix up the meta in the game, but also make some of the older vehicles a lot better than they were. So there is multiple touring cars that did get updated and also one of the Alpha GP vehicles. So definitely stay tuned for all the videos on all of those touring cars in the near future, guys. But one of the Alpha GP vehicles that was updated honestly made me insanely excited. So I'm sure a lot of players are aware of like the X-Bow R Spear Racing ED, for example, and or the regular X-Bow R basically being the best Alpha GP vehicles in the game. I have a feeling this is most likely going to change though, because one of the Alpha GP vehicles was indeed updated, so I would say a lot of players are not a big fan of the X-Bow R. I will get into more of that later on in the video here, but guys, the car that was updated is the Red Bull RB14, so I was testing this thing out a little bit in multiple races, and my goodness, I am absolutely mind blown by this car. I mean, what's funny, guys, this was actually the first car that I bought in the Alpha GP class anyway, for that matter. I really do love the look of this thing. Like, it's honestly gorgeous, similar to the Disruption Edition, which I have a feeling they will most likely roll out the updated handling model on the other cars in the future. I cannot wait for that, because once other vehicles get this handling model, I have a feeling many of the metas in the game are probably going to get stirred up pretty heavily, because let's be honest, some classes have some cars that are just honestly way too good, but the RB14 is not only going to look insanely good, but my goodness, the performance on this thing, guys, is going to back it up heavily. I might even go as far as saying this might be the new meta vehicle in the Alpha GP class. I also do want to mention, guys, let me know in the comments below if you would like me to do a comparison with the X-Bow R and or the RB14. I have a feeling this car is going to be that good. But now moving over to a couple of races with the RB14 here, just to talk about this thing a little bit more. So the first thing I noticed with this car, guys, is going to be its handling. I would say many players really like the X-Bow R, but probably also hated the vehicle a lot. And I feel like the main reason for that is the twitchiness the car had when driving it. I was starting to notice this a little bit more. What's kind of insane though is the RB14 doesn't have any weird twitchiness to it at all. I feel like this car is like a better version of it. I know that might sound kind of insane, but after driving this car for a little bit, I was indeed beating my times in a lot of the races with it. Plus, I found this car to be insanely fun to use. The handling update that was put on the RB14, I cannot wait to see what it's going to look like on some of the other Alpha GP vehicles. I really do feel like, guys, if Ubisoft keeps doing this with different cars in the game, I really do feel like the meta is going to change tremendously, because there's going to be many different vehicles you could run in different races that are also going to compete. For example, we all know the Lamborghini Countach in the street class is going to be like the meta car, even better than the Lamborghini Superleggera. And then when it comes to like the Alpha GP class, I feel like the X-Bow R and or the Spear Racing ED have basically been owning this class for a long time. But now that the RB14 is updated, because I'm not going to lie, I was not the biggest fan of this car at all back in the day. Like, I just did not like it. And the main reasons I didn't like the RB14 back in the day is most likely going to be the way the car handled. So for example, guys, when this car was being driven back then, which if I had to guess, I would say the Disruption Edition is probably going to be the same feeling right now, at least until that car is indeed updated. But for me, I felt like the RB14 almost felt like you were driving a train around a track. Like, the car did feel kind of big. I didn't like the way it was handling around corners, and I felt like the agility was non-existent. I feel like a lot of players also didn't like using this car back in the day either, because it was just not that good. And I feel like in many events similar to, like, let's say a slalom, for example, maybe an escape, and or like one of the Alpha GP races in a summit, I don't think anybody would have chose the RB14 back then, because I just don't think this car was that good. Most of the players are indeed running the X-Bow R because of the way the car handles, but I really do feel like that's going to change now, and I have a feeling the meta in the Alpha GP class is most likely going to get flipped upside down now with the RB14 being this good. I mean, I'm not going to lie, guys, I probably won't even use the X-Bow R anymore. I'm probably just going to use the RB14. Like, I like this car that much. And it's kind of insane because when racing this thing around the track, I can actually see it being way different. It also feels a lot different as well. Plus, the RB14 is also going to have one big advantage over the X-Bow R, and that's going to be its top speed. So if you guys might have been wondering, this car can do 298 miles an hour, which is going to make it one of the fastest Alpha GP cars in the game. Unfortunately, the X-Bow R does like 278, so it's about 20 miles an hour slower, which in reality really doesn't seem like a bigger top speed. But if you guys do get on straightaways on some of the races and or do something like an escape, that extra 20 miles an hour is greatly going to help your time and or your speed in some areas. Plus, I also found myself shifting the RB14 a lot better. Now, if you guys are running manual, which by the way, I basically only play in manual, and I was kind of thinking about doing some type of like manual guide or something, let me know in the comments below if you guys would like to see that. I really do feel like manual driving in these games can really help a lot with how some of the cars are geared. So getting around certain corners in the game and or very tight turns, I would say can definitely take some time to get used to, especially depending on the vehicle you might be running. One thing I did notice with the RB14 though is I was basically in 4th and 5th gear around most of the corners, and this car was literally sticking to the ground every single time. I was kind of shocked because obviously back in the day, the RB14 was definitely not feeling like it is now, and I really do feel like it's going to be a way better version of the X-Bow R, at least at the moment, until they do an updated version of the handling on the other Alpha GP cars in the game. But my goodness, guys, this thing is honestly that insane, and I really do feel like in manual this car feels a lot better as well. I really don't know why that is, considering that wasn't actually changed on it, but maybe it's because I wasn't driving this car enough back in the day, so now that I'm getting more into it, it is feeling a lot better. I feel like with the X-Bow R, I was shifting a little bit too much. And I would also find the X-Bow R to get kind of squirrely at times as well. Like when I would downshift in certain areas and or upshift around a corner, I noticed the car really wasn't having it in any way, but it looks like the RB14 is not going to have that issue. I really might have to actually do like a legit comparison on both of these vehicles now, because it's kind of insane how much better the RB14 actually feels after this update. And after doing a couple of events in the RB14, I honestly want to jump back into more and just farm money for no absolute reason, and or parts for that matter, because I find this car that fun to use, and this can honestly go into the topic of having different events mixed in together. I would love to use the RB14 on the New York Hyper Race. That would be so much fun. Ubisoft, please do something like that in the future, my goodness. But again, guys, I really do hope Ubisoft will continue to update the cars in the future, because I feel like if every Alpha GP car was similar to this one, I feel like all of them could be usable in basically every way. And one thing I was also hearing was apparently the RB14 did actually get a similar handling model to the X-Bow R, which is honestly a really good start. I really can't wait to see how the other Alpha GP vehicles will handle with this. And having that on other vehicles, guys, I feel like will greatly mix up the meta, because I feel like a lot of players might in ways get really tired of seeing one car basically destroying everything else. I honestly do agree with that. I kind of get annoyed seeing like one street car do better than everything else when there's so many of them. So seeing some cars get updated and or some cars becoming better over time with more testing, I really do think is going to help each class tremendously in the game. But let me know your thoughts on the RB14 in the comments below, and I really do feel like this might be the new best Alpha GP car in the game, at least until some of the other ones are updated for that matter. But also, guys, stay tuned for the other touring vehicles that were also updated in the near future.